Well, this feels kind of weird to say, but that's the last time this vehicle is ever going to drive anywhere under its own power. Stay with me. Now, I'm sure many of you are asking me right now, Sky, what in the world are you talking about? Why is this car going away? Well, if that is your question, I'm going to guess that you didn't actually watch the last video on this where I took it to the track, which based on the current metrics that say about 11 people watched that video, I say it's probably pretty accurate. But essentially, to give you guys a short version, I took this thing to the track, and to everyone's surprise, it yet again failed me. This car works perfectly as long as I'm testing it around my house and testing various things. As soon as I go to the track, something happens. And in this case, what happened is that factory PCM that is still in there with the HP tuners on there. HP tuners is great. I have no problem with them. But that factory ECU, when I was making the run, basically the first run of the entire event, the vehicle entered into a torque management mode and it pulled fuel during the run and went to 13-to-1, melted a bunch of plugs and hurt the engine yet again. So basically I've kind of had it with this car. I'm done with it. Realistically, the solution I should have done right from the very beginning was go to a full standalone. I wouldn't have had near the amount of problems I've had with this car. So a lot of you are probably then asking, so why are you not putting a standalone on it now and then keep going with the car? Well, truth be told, I'm just kind of over the car. It's basically ran its course as far as my attention span goes. I worked on this thing for quite a while now. We got pretty far with it, and obviously we never quite got to its full potential, but I'm just ready to move on and do something else instead. Unfortunately, that means that this car is going to go away. Now, again, another question you would probably have is, why don't you just sell the car as it is and move on? Well, realistically, the car's just not worth a lot of money in its current configuration. There's no AC. It's obviously a very temperamental car. It has a rebuilt title, so it's just not worth that much money. So the car is worth more to me if I take all of these parts off of it and I can use them for other projects or sell what I need to out of it. I can actually get more money out of it that way. And unfortunately, the shell itself is probably going to go to a scrapyard. So I apologize. I know there's going to be some of you guys out there that are just appalled at this. But again, like I said, it's a rebuilt title car and it actually has quite a few dents and dings in it. It's really not in that good a shape. So anyway, that's what we're going to be doing in this episode. We're going to strip this thing down. Also, excitingly, we're going to tear down the engine and figure out exactly what I hurt with this thing. My guess is that I think I knocked the tension out of the piston rings. So I think the pistons are rattling in the bores there once it went lean. I did look at the tops of the pistons with a bore scope and they seem to be okay, but you're never quite going to know until you actually get this thing apart. Very expensive engine, so I want to make sure that this thing is pretty solid. I'll tell you guys a little bit later what we're going to do with that engine. But for right now, the teardown is going to begin. We're going to start with taking out the transmission on this thing. All right, because I actually took my differential out of here and I took my suspension out of here, you can see I replaced it here with a solid piece of stainless steel tubing that I had. So that's my new spring. That'll work for putting this thing basically on the trailer and getting it to the scrapyard.
So sad.
Now, if you haven't seen it already from one of my other videos, this is going to be the donor engine for one of my other projects. This is my 1986 Chevy C10 square body that I call Identity Crisis because it already has a 392 Hemi in it. Now, the engine that's in there right now is just a truck 392 with the Stage 3 Texas Speed and Performance camshaft in it. So it's fairly mild overall. This engine is going to go in instead because this is a built engine because we're going to put a couple of spoolie boys on here to make some real power. And the twin turbo was always going to be the final evolution of this project. So I'm super excited about getting forward with it. However, we need to figure out exactly what's wrong with this engine right now. So it's time for an engine autopsy, figure out just how bad I hurt this thing. Okay, we're at the moment of truth here where we're gonna pull these cylinder heads. The thing that I'm looking for here is to see if I damaged any of those forged pistons in here. These things are expensive. I'd really like to not have to replace those things, but cylinder pressures got really high and it got really hot having melted those plugs. So there's a chance we hurt a piston in here or two. Really hope the problem is relegated to just the piston ring. So let's go ahead and get these cylinder heads off and take a look at those pistons. Obviously, we'll have to knock them out of the boards to really take a close look, but we should be able to inspect them decently from the top here. So far, I'm not seeing any physical damage here. One thing I do want to do as well is I'm going to kind of just do a quick measurement of the piston versus the deck height because I want to see if any of them are different from each other, like maybe we bent a rod or something of that nature. But so far, I'm not seeing anything that says that might have happened. So I don't know. We're looking pretty good. However, the other side here, cylinder number 6, is the one that really had the melted plug. So that's kind of the one we're going to need to focus in on. But doing a close check on all these pistons. Well, these pistons are pretty rattly in here, which kind of supports my thought process that it could be the piston rings. We'll know once we actually get the pistons fully out of here, but they're pretty rattly in there. On this cylinder number 8 back here, almost looks like maybe we got a head gasket or something based on some of the stuff that's in there. Let me roll the engine over. I'll get you a closer look at that. I don't know, but that stuff isn't present in any of the other cylinders. So, yeah, not sure exactly there what this is residue-wise. I mean, it's just residue, but wipes right off. Cylinder number 2 here seems to be the ultra rattly one, so that's definitely where our noise was coming from. This one's just rattling away in the bore. But again, I'm not seeing any damage to the piston itself, so that's some good news. Okay, we got the rest of the engine torn down here so we can take a look at exactly what's going on. I'll show you guys the pistons here in just a moment. They actually look okay. There is a small amount of wear on a couple of the pistons. Those ones that you could see were kind of rattling in the bore. So I was correct on that aspect of it, that we did kind of knock the tension out of some of those piston rings. So that was allowing them to rattle in the cylinder bore and cause some very minor markings around the top crown of the piston. I think we'll be just fine with those. We can reuse those. But I did find the smoking gun issue here. Now, when this issue first presented itself, to me, it absolutely sounded like a lifter failure. But I was thinking, hey, these lifters have 500 miles on them. There's no way we could have had a lifter failure. Basically, had a lifter roller failure and camshaft issue. There's no way we could have that in 500 miles. But this is an entirely different issue that I've never seen before. This is one of the lifters for cylinder number 8, and as I pulled it out of the engine, basically the back half had come free. For whatever reason, there's a little snap ring that actually fits into the back of these lifters here that holds them together, and somehow that snap ring had popped free. Now, this is one of the vaunted Hellcat lifters, which are actually just regular non-MDS lifters on all the vehicles, but regardless, I have never ever seen this issue before, and again, I do blame this on the really high cylinder pressures that happened when this engine went lean. It probably really put some force onto these things, and for whatever reason, popped that snap ring out, and so this lifter came apart. So essentially, this piece was just rattling around inside the back of the lifter, and I think that was the main source of the noise that I was hearing, although I do still believe that those pistons rattling in the bore was a factor. Now I did go ahead and disassemble the entire rest of the engine just to inspect everything, make sure everything else was still good, because when you have a failure like that, you'd hate to think you had it fixed and then put everything back together again and have a different issue. So I just wanted to inspect everything. Everything else looks great in here. The main bearings are in fantastic condition. The rod bearings, I am going to replace those only because I know how much pressure they were under when I got those really high cylinder pressures in each cylinder. So just as a precautionary measure, I'm going to go ahead and replace the rod bearings in here. Now, one other thing I wanted to do here is I went ahead and pulled the crank out, not only to inspect the journals, which all look great, but I needed to change the actual trigger wheel. Now, if you didn't watch when I first put this engine together, because I was putting it in my 05 Magnum with the older style PCM in there, it reads a different trigger wheel setting than the newer ones do, which is, this was a newer engine, 2017. So I actually had to switch the trigger wheel to one from a 6.1 liter Hemi, which as you can see has less teeth on it overall. Now, in this case, because I am going to a full standalone, I'm switching it back to the OEM trigger wheel that has more teeth, which means there's more resolution. So it has a greater accuracy of knowing exactly where the engine is at in its cycle. Greater resolution is exactly what you want for pretty much anything. So I figured, now that I'm going full standalone and we're going in the C10, let's go ahead and give ourselves the maximum amount of success by going back to the higher resolution trigger wheel here. We'll go ahead and keep this one around for if we decide to swap an older Hemi engine with a newer one anytime in the future. Okay, we're gonna get a new set of piston rings in this engine. Now this is a process I've shown you before, so not gonna go too much into detail, but I did wanna mention that last time around when I did this, I think I opened them up a little bit too much. I was definitely erring on the side of caution because I've had problems before, but the engine huffed quite a bit. And by that, I mean that there was quite a bit of crankcase vapor coming out of the catch can when the engine was warm. So if I could tighten that up a little bit and maybe take some of that down, I think that's what I'm going to do. Previously, with the top ring, the gap that I had was 28 thousandths and the secondary ring was 30 thousandths. Now this time around, we're gonna go 25 thousandths for the top ring and then 28 for the second ring. Just tighten up a little bit, still give ourselves that protection just in case of an overheating scenario with high combustion pressures. But I do kind of want to take away some of that huffing if I possibly can. So that's what we're going to do here. Now, these are filed to fit piston rings. So basically you want to get them pressed into the bore there. Use the top side of a piston and push it down about an inch. And what that does is it really gets into the meat of the cylinder there and squares up the ring, because if the ring is not even or level, that gap could be way off. So you want to square up the ring as best as possible, use a feeler gauge, and you're going to be filing off little bits of the ring at a time to try to get that gap you're looking for. Obviously, this is a process that you want to take your time with because you can't put that metal back. So definitely take your time, sneak up on it, and then get it to the exact size that you want. Also, because there are minute differences between these cylinders here, go ahead and do one at a time and specifically label which cylinder it is that you're working on with each piston. But as it is, I've got all these rings all filed to fit. Let's get them put onto the pistons and get those pistons reinstalled into the engine. Now, if you're at all serious about building engines, I highly recommend that you invest in one of these tapered style piston ring compressors. Obviously, it only fits one specific size, but I do this kind of thing over and over again, so it really made sense to invest in these. They're really not that expensive. They're like $45. I'll go ahead and post a link for this up in the corner and in the description down below. But these are so superior to your generic piston ring compressors. So basically, I just set it down flat on the block. Done. It is that easy. These things are amazing. Once you got all the rods and pistons back in, it's always a good idea to go ahead and rotate the engine, make sure everything is still spinning smoothly. Obviously, if you've got any tight spots or anything like that, something is wrong and you'll need to take it back apart again. There will be additional resistance now with the pistons installed because those rings are pressing against the cylinders. So don't be surprised that you do have some resistance, but again, it should be smooth, even pressure all the way through. It shouldn't be loose and then tight and then loose and then tight, something like that. Now, they say that variety is the spice of life, but in my opinion, I think that irony is the spice of life, because no sooner had I told you guys that tip about spinning the engine over, make sure everything still feels smooth, than when I did that on this engine and I felt a very distinct tight spot. I was like, well, that's interesting. What is that? And upon further diagnosis, taking some things back apart, it turns out I've got a bent connecting rod. This number 8 cylinder here. Now, if you remember, this is a cylinder that has the bad lifter that I found. So what I believe happened in this instance is I think it actually lifted the head a little bit. I got some coolant down in that cylinder and it hydrolocked that cylinder, bent the rod, and kicked the back out of that piston. Now I do still need to inspect the back of the cylinder head itself, make sure I don't have any valve issues, but that seems to be what's going on in this case. Not a huge deal, but quite a bummer that I'm gonna have to try to get a new connecting rod. Hopefully I don't have to buy an entire set because they are expensive, but hopefully I can get just one of these. But slap a new one of those in there. The piston seems okay. You can see a mark here on the bottom where it was actually touching the crankshaft counterweight, but it doesn't appear to have affected the piston at all. It just kind of wore off the coating a little bit, so not too concerned about that. We're just gonna slap a new connecting rod in this thing and we should be good to go. Now, unfortunately, waiting for that new connecting rod is going to put a damper on our timeline, so that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you guys are excited about the C10 build here. I know I am. It's going to be some really fun fabrication. And if you're wondering what's going to happen to the 392 engine that's in there right now, well, it's going to go in this thing right here. But that's going to be another episode entirely. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you next time on Reignited.